Joining me now, Senator Bob Casey, Democrat of Pennsylvania, who's currently seeking re-election. Senator, thank you for being with us tonight. The Vice President is off the campaign trail this weekend, and she meets with a list of 6 potential running mates ahead of Tuesday's rally in Philadelphia, where she'll campaign with her VP pick for the first time. And at least one of the front runners for the job is your Pennsylvania governor, Josh Shapiro. Regardless of who gets the job, what are you hoping the vice president's running mate will bring to the ticket?
Well, Reverend Al, great to be with you. First of all, thanks for having me on. And look, Tuesday night is going to be an exciting night, not just for our Commonwealth, but for the country, because we're going to be able to see Kamala Harris kind of in the early stages of her campaign, as we've seen just over the last 12 or 13 days. And she'll be in Philadelphia, which is one of the places where we have to get a great vote. So I think it's a great place to start, not just for Pennsylvania, but also for the so-called battleground states. And look, she's got a number of folks that she's reviewing to be vice president, to be her running mate. And that's her decision, first and foremost. I obviously favor Governor Shapiro. I think he'd give us a big lift in Pennsylvania. I think he'd be a really strong running mate. But that's her decision. But I think that in the end, regardless of who's chosen, we're going to have to work night and day to win the race for president in Pennsylvania. And I've got a tough race myself. We're going to have a close race and a very tough race because of the resources on the other side.
Let me stay right there, because let me stay right in Pennsylvania. You're locked in one of the most competitive Senate races in the country, and conservative mega donors have flooded the state with super PAC money to boost your Republican opponent, former hedge fund CEO Dave McCormick. This week, new polling in the state showed you ahead of McCormick, 47% to 42% if the election were held today. That same poll also showed Vice President Harris leading Donald Trump in Pennsylvania, 47 to 43% within the margin of error. Describe the 2024 race in Pennsylvania now versus about a month ago.
Yeah, there's no question. I think that Vice President Harris has made a lot of progress in a short time frame. So she's got an awful lot of early momentum, but it's momentum we have to maintain. In the race I'm in, it's going to remain close, and it'll get closer mostly because of those billionaire funded super PACs. There's a super PAC in our state that's has been advertising against me for weeks, where one guy, a billionaire, gave $10 million, and that's just the beginning. This is someone who's worth probably more than $30 billion. So they're going to continue to attack me. And the reason they're going to attack me is not just to try to boost my opponent, but they're attacking me because they know I voted against their billionaire tax cuts and the big tax cuts for corporations that the Republicans rammed through in 2017. And if I get reelected, I'm going to vote against those billionaire and corporate tax breaks again in 2025, when we have another tax vote. So they know that I'm going to be voting that way, and they're angry at me for that. And they're also angry that I took on corporate America's greedflation when they're jacking up the price of food and household items. And then I want to pass a price gouging bill to go after them. That's why they're attacking me. So I'd say to folks out there listening, if you're with us in taking on this fight against big corporations and billionaires, go to bobcasey.com.
Now, Senator, you and I are old enough to remember Trump's political career, beginning in large part with his birther attacks on Barack Obama. And now Trump has retooled that attack to the vice president over her identity, suggesting that her blackness is in question because she's publicly claimed her South Asian roots. That message got him in trouble this week at the National Association of Black Journalists convention. So naturally, he tripled down on it on the campaign trail and on social media. Can he amplify his identity-based attacks, which I believe he will, without it costing him support? And if so, What does that say about the Republican Party that's backing him?
Well, it's an ugly practice, and it's insulting. It's also contrary to the American spirit, the American tradition, where we should be celebrating when someone becomes the nominee of a major party who is unlike anyone who came, in this case, before her, and that should be something we celebrate. If the former president or any candidate wants to litigate the issues, that's one thing. But to attack someone's very identity, I think is contrary to the American spirit. And I got news for Republicans: it's not going to work. And I think it demonstrates. I think it's proof positive that they don't really know how to make the case against Kamala Harris, because they're resorting to the most ugly and mean-spirited tactics. And it's not going to work this time. People can see through it. They know that major rights are on the line in this race, like voting rights and women's rights and workers' rights, and they're going to see right through it.
And it also happens to not be true. I've known Kamala Harris 30 years, and she's always stood as a black who also has Asian roots. I mean, her whole campaign for district attorney, she was the first black district attorney in San Francisco, first black attorney general of the state of California, first black U.S. senator that was a black woman. She always said that, always was proud of that. Went to a historically black college and was pledged to a black sorority. So Donald Trump is lying again. Oh, well, that's not exactly a news flash. Thank you, Pennsylvania Senator Bob Casey. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Joining me now is our friend Zerlina Maxwell, host of Mornings with Zerlina on SiriusXM, former director of progressive media for the Clinton campaign, and author of The End of White Politics: How to Heal Our Liberal Divide. Welcome, Zerlina. We got to focus on this weekend because the vice president is expected to meet in person with some of the top contenders. Based on who is left on the short list, who do you think makes the best strategic decision?
Look, I think that she has a lot of good candidates on this list, and I think that it's not necessarily which one of these men is the right pick, but the right pick is the person that who's going to keep the momentum going, the person that is going to do no harm to the excitement and the enthusiasm that you've seen organically in the first 2 weeks of this campaign. And so I think all of these choices are strong. It's going to come down to who she gets along with well and who she thinks she can govern the country well with.
Yeah. So we have the Washington Post reporting that Harris has hired several Obama campaign veterans to join her 2024 efforts. You've worked on campaigns, Zerlina, in the past. So what does this signal to you?
That she wants experienced hands, people who both have won 2 elections for former President Barack Obama, and also Jen Palmieri, who worked on 2016 Hillary Clinton's campaign. And I think that the combination of these experienced hands, you're not doing anything with your eyes closed. You've run against Donald Trump. That's where Jen's experience comes in very handy. She knows what it is like to run against someone like Donald Trump, who just lies so often that it could be very difficult to gain traction in this mainstream media environment. And so I think that you put everybody on the field who can win. And that is what she's doing by hiring all of these different folks.
Yeah. Interestingly, this new report from Axios, it highlights how Vice President Harris has deviated from President Biden's strategy. And for example, here, she has rarely used the term democracy. Instead, she's focusing on the words freedom and future. And then again, unlike Biden, Harris has mostly shied away from exchanging quips with Donald Trump. So instead, here's how she responds to his many insults. She just offers a simple debate me or say it to my face. What's your read on this?
I love that she's going with the freedom message. On my radio show, I've been talking about the fact that this election is about freedom. In 2016, we were warning about the overturning of Roe versus Wade if Donald Trump were elected. Now we're talking about Roe versus Wade being gone and those freedoms and rights that we've had for generations being gone. But those aren't the only rights at stake And I think that when you frame it under a message of freedom, that's something that resonates more than talking about democracy. Even though that is also true, I think people can understand viscerally what it means when you have rights and freedoms taken away from you, particularly when it's being taken away by two men like Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. Remember, Donald Trump is an adjudicated sexual abuser. He's somebody who's been found liable for fraud. He's a convicted felon. And J.D. Vance apparently hates people who like cats. And so for those two men to be the ones that are taking away our freedoms, that's something that viscerally I think people can respond to, and it will make them participate and mobilize to stop those two folks from returning to power.
So all this change that we're talking about, it seems to be clearly working because you have the Black Muslim Leadership Council Fund that has endorsed Harris after formally withholding its support for Biden, largely due to his handling of the war in Gaza. How critical is this? And I guess the big question is, how was she able to establish her own independent position on this issue as a member of the Biden administration?
I think that she's been able to establish an independent position. Number one, she had to go along with what the administration policy was. But I think that moment on the Edmund Pettus Bridge commemorating the anniversary of Bloody Sunday, where she called for a ceasefire, and the reports that she was very, very vocal behind the scenes in the administration, talking about the need to do more to protect Palestinian children. I think that she has a slightly different viewpoint and perspective on this issue. And that's going to become very important as you're trying to consolidate your base of support to mobilize the multiracial, multi-generational coalition that you need to win. And so I think that she's establishing her own position independent of the president. It doesn't mean that she's disagreeing on everything, but I think that being independent-minded on this issue is something that's very important.
Yeah. Can I ask you quickly just to react to what Donald Trump said at NABJ, saying that he didn't know Kamala Harris was black until a short time ago, that she's changing it up? I mean, I'd give you 20 seconds to answer that one.
I don't know why anybody's asking what Donald Trump thinks about Kamala Harris's race. I really don't think that a white man like Donald Trump has any right to weigh in on what her identity is. She has been black all her life. She's also South Asian. She hasn't shied away from both parts of her identity. He has no right to weigh in at all whatsoever.
Okay. Duly noted. Zerlina Maxwell, thank you so much. Good to see you.
In the days after Vice President Harris entered the 2024 race, a seismic shift happened among young voters. Harris was leading Trump by 20 points among 18 to 34-year-olds nationwide, while President Biden had been leading Trump by just 6 points. But that doesn't mean the vice president can count on those votes come November. As NBC News notes, Gen Z voters are largely optimistic about Harris, but they say she still needs to prove herself on the campaign trail, and that's all true. Joining us now is co-founder and president of Leaders We Deserve and co-founder of March for Our Lives, David Hogg. Welcome, David. It's good to have you at the table, man.
Good to see you, Michael.
Yeah.
It's very good to see you, David. I remember in 2020, part of the coalition building that the Biden campaign had to do was to pull in all of these progressive groups, younger groups, people who may not necessarily be primed to be with Joe Biden in the race, but given the stakes and whatnot, everybody came together and said, we're going to work in tandem on these issues. But many people did not endorse. Sunrise didn't endorse. Oh, they did end up endorsing, but March for Our Lives did not. March for Our Lives, though, this year has endorsed Vice President Harris. It's her first ever presidential campaign endorsement. And to me, I think that speaks volumes. I think that means that not only do folks understand the stakes in this election, but that this is something that they feel like they need to, put, that they too, they too have their, have a stake in the game, if you will. That this isn't just we're going to all come together because we have to beat Donald Trump. We're coming together, we have to beat him. But also they want to be in on the ground floor of this well of enthusiasm. Am I reading that right, you think?
Yeah, I think in the case of March for Our Lives, historically, we had never endorsed anyone because, when we started as a result of political failure. It was hard because so many people wanted to use us and say, oh, will you endorse me for this, and then do nothing for us, because that's how a lot of stuff works in this town, obviously. And I think with the when President Biden was first running, we really wanted to make sure that he delivered in the first place. We wanted to make sure that we had credibility with young people to say, you know, we want you to go out there and vote. We want you to make your voice heard. But we also want politicians who deliver for us, that we don't just constantly say, oh, my God, you're so amazing. Thank you for being supportive of the bare minimum. And what we saw with Vice President Harris was what a champion this administration had been, doing more than any administration before, really, in modern American history on gun violence, whether it was the most executive orders ever, the passage of the first federal gun law in 30 years after Uvalde, or the creation of the Office of Gun Violence Prevention that Congressman Maxwell Frost, March for Our Lives former organizing director, had been pushing for, along with March, for the past 3 years prior to the creation of that office. And we want to make sure that these politicians, they always ask for our endorsement. We ask them to endorse us by delivering for us. And that's what we've seen from Vice President Harris and why we endorsed her.
So let's go with the headline, though. You know, Gen Z voters are you know, optimistic about the Harris campaign. You just noted, you know, what that has looked like. But what else are you expecting? What else are Gen Z voters needing to cement that relationship? Because as you and I have talked about in the past, and you know, and I damn sure do, growing up here in D.C., a lot of folks do the blue smoke and mirror thing, and they sound good on paper, and they can lean in on this occasion, but in the important occasions later on, you're saying, okay, where's everybody? So what does that expectation look like going forward? Because it's not just about this cycle. Are there metrics that you're expecting, not just you, but Gen Z voters are expecting to see materialize within 100 days of a Biden or a Harris administration? What does that look like for you guys?
Well, I think more than anything, to talk about what the biggest thing the campaign needs to do right now is remind young people what the administration has done for young people. And why, for example, we were not able to cancel all student debt, as we talked about, because of the Supreme Court. I've talked to many young people around the country who say to me, you know, they talked about canceling student debt, but my student debt is still there. And I have to explain to them, well, you know, that's because of Donald Trump's appointed Supreme Court members, right? They're also the same ones that want it, that repealed Roe versus Wade, that want to ban abortion, that want to weaken gun laws, and so much more. And when I say that, their eyes open up and they say to me, what? That's crazy. Why would they want to ban abortion? I say, exactly. So you need to go out and vote this November. But if we don't tell them that, and they just see, am I better off 4 years later than I am now, and they feel like they aren't because of the Supreme Court, because of the reversal of Roe versus Wade, we need to do a job. Unfortunately, the campaign, because of the failure in part of some of many states' civics education system, we have to educate people about the fact that the president is not a dictator, frankly, right? He is not, she is not somebody who can just get whatever they want, because there's a good system of checks and balances, but there are also drawbacks to that, like we saw with student debt, like we've seen with Roe versus Wade, and we need to educate these young voters about what the administration has done, whether that's the most climate spending ever of any country in human history to prevent disastrous climate change. That's the passage of the first gun law in 30 years. That in the first quarter of this year, we saw a 20% reduction in gun homicides. That is nowhere near enough, but it's a hell of a lot better than where we were going previously. And with that, we also need to remind them, too, of all the student debt that's been canceled, but we need to be careful of how we talk about it, right? Most people who have had their student debt canceled, when I tell people this, they're always surprised by it. Most people who have had their student debt canceled are above 30 years old. So when we pull young people, 18 to 29-year-olds, and we say, what do you mean? You don't understand. The Biden administration has canceled your student debt. One, that's a very small segment that we've actually been able to cancel, thank you to Trump's puppets on the Supreme Court and the corruption there, like Clarence Thomas, like we've seen recently. That guy has to go, by the way. On top of that, we need to meet young voters where they're at and not degrade them and say, well, you don't understand. Your life is better because our GDP has grown this much, or this has grown that much, or these numbers tell us otherwise. The fact is their debt is higher than it was 4 years ago, whether it's student debt, their debt in terms of how the cost of living, right? Rent has gone up enormously for these young people, and we need to meet them where they're at.
See, I think this point is so important, David, because I think when we throw around terms like Gen Z and millennials, like, The millennials are the people who have gotten their student debt canceled.
Yes.
The oldest millennials this year are turning 44, right? The youngest, like the oldest Gen Zers are 27. The youngest Gen Zers are 12. Okay, so we are talking, if you're 18 to 29, like you are the Gen Z folks. If you're over, a little overlap with the millennials, but there is, I just think people throw around the terms, don't understand who we're talking about, and then haven't drilled down on really what the issues are. And I think economic issues bubble to the top for everyone, and that's what you're saying when you're talking about debt, when you're talking about housing, talking about rent, just the ability to be able to like live. We want to have a good time, but goodness, it's expensive.
Right.
So I just think you were just such a credible and great messenger on this. In the time that we have left, what are you hearing from young people across the country? What concerns you most and what excites you?
What concerns me the most is the hopelessness that I've heard. You know, just last year I started an organization called Leaders We Deserve that helps elect young people around the country because I want young people to know that their voice is heard and that they're out there and not all hope is lost. And that's really what concerns me because if we don't bring the hope back, we're going to get another Donald Trump because that is the greatest threat to American democracy. That's why I'm doing the work at Leaders We Deserve. And my biggest hope is that we just turn out as many young people as possible this November. And I hope you guys join us because we have a call for supporters of gun reform coming up for the Harris campaign that you can find out the link to on my Twitter.
All right.
Just real quick, I know we're about to let you go, but what do your candidate pool look like for young candidates this November?
That's a great question. So we have some amazing candidates, younger candidates running for in swing districts in swing states. So in Georgia, we have Ashwin Ramaswamy, not related to Vivek.
Right.
But he is a 24-year-old software engineer that just graduated from Georgetown Law, who is running against one of Trump's fake electors right now. And if he was elected, he would be the first Indian American ever elected to anything higher than city council in Georgia. And we're working with candidates like that around the country, but we need people to support us. So you can go to leaderswedeserve.com to help support our work, to turn out young people by giving them other young people to vote for around the country.
Love it.
That's right.
Good
Now,
stuff.
David,
Good
we
stuff.
appreciate you. Thank you for all you're doing. He put a suit on for us today, y'all.
I know he did, right?
We love it. We love to see it. Come
The Harris campaign is focused on flipping North Carolina this November. We talked about it a little bit earlier. The vice president will be in Raleigh with her soon-to-be-announced running mate this week. North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper removed his name from consideration, telling Politico he made the decision in part because, quote, Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson, the GOP gubernatorial nominee, could try to seize power temporarily whenever Cooper was out of the state campaigning with Harris. Here's why Robinson taking power would be so problematic.
There's no reason anybody anywhere in America should be telling any child about transgenderism, homosexuality, any of that filth. And yes, I called it filth. Abortion in this country is not about protecting the lives of mothers. It's about killing a child because you aren't responsible enough to keep your skirt down. I absolutely want to go back to the America where women couldn't vote. If I had all the power right now, let's say I was the governor and had a willing legislature, we could pass a bill say you can't have an abortion in North Carolina for any reason.
Okay, joining us now is North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper. Governor, welcome. Good to see you, sir.
Well, Governor Cooper, I think after seeing these clips, people will understand your decision. I mean, we read through the political conversation that you had, but I'm wondering if you could just expand upon this even more. So it is, in fact, true that you proactively told the Harris team that you did not want to be vetted for the reasons of the clips we just saw.
That certainly was part of the reason, Simone and Michael, and I'm sorry I can't be with you there in person. It was great being around your table and would love to do that again sometime soon, but this is the next best way. Look, it's important for me to note, I am 100% behind Kamala Harris. I have known her since we were attorneys general. She put violent criminals behind bars. She stood up to the big banks and to big pharma. I worked with her when she was in the United States Senate. We would often talk about judges from North Carolina. And she's been to North Carolina 15 times as vice president. She has to win, and we're going to do everything we can to win North Carolina. Yes, I did let the Harris campaign know early in the process that this was just not the right time for me or my state. we have one of these archaic constitutional provisions. I call them wagon wheel provisions, where when the governor leaves the state, the Constitution says the lieutenant governor becomes the governor. Now, there have been a number of court cases across the country in states that have had similar provisions. You would know why you would need it 150 years ago. But those courts have ruled that, no, with modern technology, with the governor being able to stay in touch, then that is not what it means. And when you think about it, it really doesn't make sense. If I'm testifying in front of Congress in Washington, or I'm recruiting a business in another state or another country, or I'm at an in-law's funeral out of state, it doesn't make any sense that the lieutenant governor would take over. But when I was in Japan on a trip, the lieutenant governor held a press conference, signed a proclamation honoring the state of Israel, I guess to make up for his anti-Semitic comments and for denying the Holocaust. But we believed that it was quite possible that if I were on the ticket as vice president, he could be doing something every week. And he may or may not be successful in doing it, but he would certainly cause a distraction that would be magnified times 10 because of what's happening at the presidential level. So that was certainly part of the reason why I did that. Another reason is that she has a wealth of candidates from which to choose. I know the 4 governors now that are under consideration. Each one of them bring amazing strengths and would be extraordinary serving as a vice president to her. I know she's going to be choosing in a couple of days. We're going to welcome them to Raleigh, or it may be Chapel Hill, but welcome them to North Carolina on Thursday of next week with a big rally, kickoff, winning North Carolina. I got that 2008 feel. We won North Carolina for Barack Obama. I have that same feeling now. We're going to really, really get to work here.
Governor, I appreciate your first point about being out of the country or out of the state and what that means. We have a similar provision in Maryland. When I was lieutenant governor, I was always inviting the governor to take a trip so he could, he could go anywhere he wanted to. Now's the time to explore America and the world. I got you back here at home. You're good. I
was going to ask you about that, Michael. I was, and I just decided I would not because I wasn't going to put you on the spot. But now that you brought it up, well,
I mean, but how unusual. I mean, I think it's an important point, though, Governor, because, Michael, were you holding press conferences trying to sign proclamations? No, I was not holding press conferences.
I was doing the work that the governor allowed me to do, because in Maryland, as is probably in other states, in North Carolina, he's elected separately, but we serve at the pleasure of the governor, very much like the vice president serves at the pleasure of the president. So you have your assignments, you have the things you're responsible for. You don't go rogue on the leadership. But because you have the situation in your state, like in Virginia, for example, where the lieutenant governor runs separately, not as a ticket, from the governor, you can have these sort of mixed tickets where you have a Republican or a Democratic governor and the opposite for lieutenant governor. I do want to make a quick point, because I do want to move off of the lieutenant governor for a second, because I think what's happening in North Carolina, which you just raised, is important. But I do think it's important, to your concern, that you have someone who has said, as part of a Sunday sermon in a church, that some folks need killing in violation in church, and all these Christians applauding him. Right? Y'all remember this little thing called the Sixth Commandment, right? Mr. Robinson, you know what that is, don't you? So let's understand why the governor has the kind of concern he has here. So setting that aside for a moment, Governor, North Carolina, I think, is a state that is in play, and it has been in play for a while, not just in the 2008 cycle, but there's a trend line that starts in Virginia, comes down into North Carolina, South Carolina. Now we see it playing out in Georgia and elsewhere in the South. The Democrats have made some important strides with governors and lieutenant governors and state reps like yourself, who understand exactly what governing principles mean. You're a popular governor. We see in Georgia the Republican governor there is supported by Democrats because in some instances he's been good for some of the issues that they think are important. How does that?
I'm gonna hold my tongue because Governor Cooper is sitting here.
I know you are, but I'm just saying. I know that's not true across the board. But what I'm saying is there are governors in states where they're serving. Can make a big difference. In North Carolina, the Democrats have made a big difference in a once violently red-blue state.
Yeah, we can. We're very close to the people. We have to get things done. We're responsible for making things happening. Unlike a legislature, unlike Congress, where they just yell back and forth and things rarely get done, governors have to do that. And here in North Carolina, we've been able to leverage a lot working with the Biden-Harris administration. We've been able to expand Medicaid. We've got about 513,000 more people who now have health insurance for the first time. And the Biden-Harris administration gave us a bonus for doing that. We were finally able to assemble coalitions across the state with Republicans and Democrats, tough on crime sheriffs, Republican county commissioners, chambers of commerce, all knew that working people needed health insurance. So we were able to get that done. We're now working on getting rid of medical debt. The vice president and I are working on leveraging Medicaid funds with hospitals to erase medical debt. We have about 2 million people in North Carolina owing about $4 billion in medical debt. So things are getting done. And I think that with this race this November, that we can leverage a lot of that in the third fastest growing state in the country, in a state which was Donald Trump's closest win. He only won by 1.3%. We have people moving into North Carolina from the technology sector, from the life sciences sector, from the aerospace sector. The data shows that we can flip North Carolina for the Democrats. And we're really excited about that opportunity. And it's pretty clear that the Harris campaign believes that too. Because of all of the swing states where she's going next week, this is the one state that Biden-Harris lost. It was their closest loss. The rest of the states are one in which they won. This is the one offensive state. And we are ready to engage. Our young people are excited for this. We just got to keep the fever pitch and continue to run through the tape here. I said this on Politico. You probably heard it, but I'm a sports guy. And it's like we were 12 points down. We made a big run. We've caught up. We've tied the score. Now we've got to take it over the finish line because sometimes people celebrate too early. And people are really happy about Kamala Harris as our candidate, but we cannot get overconfident because this race can go either way. It's a 50-50 race. It's a turnout race. We got to get our people excited. We got to get our people to the polls. Kamala Harris is getting people excited. We just got to execute now.
People should know that Governor Cooper has been an elected official since about 1986, and he hasn't lost a race since he has been on the ballot. So he knows a little bit something about turning out folks in North Carolina. Governor, we appreciate your time. There's a governor's race in North Carolina. It is on the ballot in the presidential race. So important, and we hope to have you back at the table very, very soon. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Have a great Sunday.
Good to see you.
Take care, Governor.
Don't take your eyes off this presidential campaign. It's moving fast. This weekend, Vice President Harris is holding meetings with her potential VP picks as an announcement is expected in the next few days. For his part, Donald Trump is speaking at a campaign rally in Atlanta this hour, hoping to regain the momentum the Harris campaign has stolen from him. He's also ditching the next scheduled presidential debate on ABC on September 10th, saying he's accepted a home turf debate on Fox News on September 4th. Harris's response? Nah, boo, I'll be there on the 10th. I'll be dissecting all that with our guests in a moment. But first, I want to address Trump's racist assertion that the VP turned black. If you want to know just how black Vice President Kamala Harris is, just turn to page 101 of her 2019 book, The Truths We Hold. She writes about that time as California Attorney General during last decade's mortgage crisis when she told her staff to get the chairman and CEO of JP Morgan Chase on the phone. He was about to kill a settlement deal with the states. Told he was on the line, Harris writes, "I took off my earrings, the Oakland in me, and picked up the receiver." Listen, Oakland is as synonymous with being black as taking off your earrings before you're about to administer a figurative or literal beatdown. If you didn't know that Harris went to an HBCU, Howard University, or is a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha, the first black sorority in the United States that was founded at Howard, her invocation of Oakland and earrings would be all you needed to know about her blackness. Harris didn't just happen to turn black, as trifling Donald Trump told a convention of black journalists this week. Her father was black. She was raised black. And we have her mother, Shamala Gopalan, a cancer researcher who immigrated to the United States from India for college, to thank for it. Harris writes in her book, quote, "For almost the moment she arrived from India, she chose and was welcomed to and enveloped in the black community. It was the foundation of her new American life." But Harris adds this very important point. "My mother understood very well that she was raising two black daughters. She knew that her adopted homeland would see Maya and me as black girls, and she was determined to make sure we would grow into confident, proud black women." And we have seen that confident, proud black woman on display in the nearly 2 weeks that she has been the de facto Democratic nominee for President of the United States. We saw it in the sister girl look Harris gave Senator Richard Burr when he interrupted her during her grilling of then Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. We saw it in how she paused after saying this during her visit to the Wilmington campaign office.
In those roles, I took on perpetrators of all kinds.
And we heard it and saw it in Atlanta this week when she looked directly into the camera and challenged Trump to debate her next month.
If you've got something to say, say it to my face.
I haven't seen anything that black on the presidential stage since Barack Obama sang Amazing Grace. Donald Trump is so flummoxed by Harris that he's trying to wield her race and gender as weapons against her, as if they are some kind of disqualifying weight for her to bear. And that's rich coming from a twice impeached, 4 times indicted, convicted on 34 felony counts former president, who was also found liable for fraud and sexual abuse and indicted for trying to overturn the 2020 election, and steal national security secrets. If you've noticed, Vice President Harris spends little time addressing Trump's racism and misogyny. That's because Vice President Harris is not running to be the black president or the Indian American president, the woman president, or even the black woman president. She's running to be president, period. Harris is not about to let the foolishness of a mediocre and entitled white man who thinks he's better than she is deter her from her goal. And that's as black as it gets.
Let's bring in Olivia Troy, former national security official for the Trump administration and now part of the newly announced Republicans for Harris Group. And you have to add one of our favorites as well. So, Olivia, you're a lifelong Republican, but you have long distinguished yourself as not part of MAGA. And you say, quote, "The stakes are too high to not speak out in this election." So tell us more, first of all, about Republicans for Harris and why you're a part of it.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me, Alex. It's always good to talk with you and converse with you. So this launched today. It's an initiative to grow this bipartisan coalition to support Kamala Harris and get her to victory. I think a lot of us lean conservative, as you know, and I think what is happening here with the Republican Party, we believe is dangerous and extreme. And I think we need to get back to the values of, observing the rule of law, of standing with our international allies and actually providing true leadership to the world, which is something that Kamala Harris has exhibited during the Biden administration. And I think we need to stand strong against another possibility of potentially having Donald Trump back in the presidency. And so our goal is to create this bridge to others. And my goal is to get out there and encourage conservative voters, Republicans, independents, to join the fold and stand strong against what this MAGA movement is right now and all it stands for.
Do you think there's safety in numbers? I mean, could this group inspire other prominent Republicans to come forward and endorse Kamala Harris? Do you think there are a lot of them out there that, for fear of being singled out, targeted, verbally assaulted, bullied by Donald Trump, they have remained closed mouth or, you know, even said something that may not be in their heart, actually, and support him?
Yes, absolutely. Look, it's no secret. I'm sure they have seen what's happened to people like me. People like, well, look at what's happening to Governor Kemp now by Donald Trump, right? And in true real time right now, what's happening, the way that Donald Trump is going after him. And so I think people think about what does that mean for death threats, which I've certainly been the recipient of, and so many others of us have. I think of people like Adam Kinzinger and what his family's come through, what it means for your stability, financial stability, job security, I would say. It impacts all of this. But I think at the end of the day, we need to all take a stand against the potential that this man could come back into office. I think this is extremely dangerous. And look, I think the coalition will grow. I'm having conversations with Republican voters who privately will tell me that they're very concerned. They're horrified about what's happening in the Republican Party. They're ashamed at what's happening about all these leaders that could make a difference falling back in line. And so I think that this coalition will grow. And you may not hear them. You may not hear them publicly, but I can tell you that behind closed doors, they're there. And look, one thing I tell people, your vote is private. You go in that voting booth and you vote your conscience, your morals, and your integrity, and think about the difference that can make. No one needs to know what happens behind that voting booth. It's between you and what your decision.
That's a good point. How about, since we're focusing on this, a VP candidate, is there one who you think could most appeal to Republicans and those Haley voters that may still be on the fence?
Well, I think given the narrowing field, I think they're all great candidates. I think, hoping for a moderate voice on the ticket that I think will be appealing to center right and the middle, which I do think is the main swing vote and will court those voters. Personally, I think highly of all of them. I will tell you, though, that I have seen Tim Walz in meetings against Trump. I have been in the room when he was there as a governor. I have seen him take him on firsthand when he was being bullied by Donald Trump, and I was very impressed with his demeanor and the way he behaved.
Okay, duly noted. So Republicans for Harris, we understand, is focusing on battleground Nikki Haley voters. So what needs to be done to win over these specific voters who, may be put off by Trump, but wary about voting for a Democrat, despite what you said that they can do when they go into the private polling booth?
Look, I think this is, a critical time for our country. And I think we need to take a step back and say, Donald Trump does not represent true conservative Republican values. That party right now is nowhere in sight. I would say that to them. And I think we need to decide, what kind of future do we want for America? And that moment is right now. What do you want to see at your kitchen table when you're sitting around? Do you want more divisiveness and anger? Do you want to be arguing with your neighbors, your friends? I think this is a moment to really actually stand by and unify so that we can get back to doing actual arguments on policy, right? And we can talk about taxes. And I'm a Republican because I believe in strong foreign policy. And I worked at the Department of Defense. I look at international relations and things like that. Right now, I would say that the last thing I want is a Trump presidency, because I think all our international relations plummet under him. And so I'm asking conservatives to, yes, take a step back from the party identity. I know it's hard, but I think that we've got to chart a better path and a better way for our party. And by doing this, I think maybe we stand a chance of getting there someday. But right now, the choice is Kamala Harris.
Okay. Last quick question, considering you worked closely with former Vice President Mike Pence, who's not publicly endorsed Trump in his reelection, has stayed out of the spotlight. What are the chances Pence ends up endorsing Harris? What do you think?
I don't know. That would be an amazing dream. And if he's, out there listening right now, I encourage you to do the right thing again. You've shown tremendous courage in the past. You know what's at stake more than anyone here, and your voice could make an enormous difference for conservatives across the country. And at the end of the day, this is about democracy, the ideals that the Republican Party has held in the past about individual liberties and freedoms. That's what Kamala Harris is trying to do here. She's trying to build that coalition so that we preserve those rights.
Okay. Speaking of courage, you've shown a lot of that for us. Olivia Troy, thank you so much, my friend. Good to see you.
The first thing we should tell you today is that we are watching and waiting for any news at all about Kamala Harris's running mate. The vice president has been meeting with candidates one-on-one at her home in Washington this weekend. Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, and Arizona Senator Mark Kelly are all meeting with her today. Former Attorney General Eric Holder, who's the guy who's overseeing the vetting process, has been seen exiting her house as well, and that's an important thing to watch for, too. And she's holding a rally on Tuesday night with her running mate in Philadelphia. So basically, we are clearly getting very, very close to a decision here. And if we learn anything new at all in the next hour, I promise I will let you know as soon as we know. But the fact is, no matter who she chooses, the announcement of this pick is going to build even more momentum on top of the already growing momentum for the Harris campaign. The vice president has been holding big, energizing rallies, like the one with Megan Thee Stallion, where she performed in Atlanta this week, where the rapper coined the phrase "Hotties for Harris." She brought on a number of all-star campaign veterans like David Plouffe, Stephanie Cutter, Jennifer Palmieri, and Mitch Stewart to add to an already seasoned team. The money is continuing to pour in at an insane pace. The Harris campaign said this week they raised a record-breaking $310 million in July. And in a brand new CBS News poll out just this morning, Harris has a 1-point edge nationally over Trump. And they are tied across the collective battleground states, which is the most important thing to watch, those battleground states. So the momentum is pretty clear to anyone watching. What is also clear is that all the attention on Harris, all the momentum, is driving Trump kind of crazy. And he is twisting himself into a pretzel as a result. And I'll tell you that this weekend was a weird one for Donald Trump, even by Donald Trump standards. I mean, at his own rally last night in Atlanta, his own rally, where, by the way, he had a much harder time filling the same venue Harris appeared at earlier in the week, he had some very strange things to say, like when he congratulated Vladimir Putin, of all people, for the historic prisoner swap that freed American citizens from Russia. He also repeatedly attacked Georgia's very popular, very beloved Republican Governor Brian Kemp for not being sufficiently loyal to him.
Atlanta is like a killing field, and your governor ought to get off his ass and do something about it. Brian Kemp, your governor, who I got elected, by the way, is a very disloyal person, isn't he? Very disloyal. Kemp and Raffensperger are doing everything possible to make 2024 difficult for Republicans to win. Kemp is very bad for the Republican Party. You can do a lot better, and you'll do a lot better with a better governor. His state has become a laughingstock over it. He's a bad guy, and he's not doing this country a good service. He's a bad guy, he's a disloyal guy, and he's a very average governor. Little Brian Kemp. Bad guy.
Okay, first of all, none of that is true. And beyond that, Brian Kemp is a widely popular Republican governor in a very important state where Trump was literally speaking. He was just saying that on the stage, in that home state. A guy who was reportedly open to campaigning with him this fall, despite not supporting him in the primary, but it doesn't seem like it anymore. Like I said, Trump is twisting himself into this very strange, weird pretzel, right? I mean, earlier in the day on Saturday, before all of the dictator congratulating and bashing of popular members of his own party in their states, Donald Trump pulled out of a debate he had already agreed to. Trump said he would not be attending the already scheduled ABC News debate on September 10th. Instead, he proposed a debate on Fox News, of course, a week earlier with a full arena audience. Let's pause on that for a moment. He's saying he will not participate in the debate he already agreed to some time ago unless it turns into a MAGA rally with Fox moderators. Got it. For her part, Harris responded by saying, It's interesting how any time, any place becomes one specific time, one specific safe space. I'll be there on September 10th, like he agreed to. I hope to see him there. Guys, all of this is what it looks like when one candidate has the momentum and the other has no idea what to do about it and is driving him a little crazy. Here's the thing. Kamala Harris is going to continue to own the spotlight for a while here. Her VP pick is coming literally any moment. She'll hold rallies with her running mate all across battleground states next week. A couple of weeks later, there'll be the Democratic convention. And Donald Trump is going to hate every second of that. You know why? Because he loves attention. And he will get more and more outrageous and unhinged as a result. We're likely to see more ugly, racist attacks like the one we saw from Trump this week in Chicago, when he questioned the vice president's racial identity. The good news is she seems ready to respond to that one, too.
It was the same old show. The divisiveness and the disrespect. And let me just say, the American people deserve better. The American people deserve better. The American people deserve a leader who tells the truth, a leader who does not respond with hostility and anger when confronted with the facts. We deserve a leader who understands that our differences do not divide us. They are an essential source of our strength.
That's a pretty good response to all of it, I think. I mean, to the racist attacks, to the unhinged rallies, to the games over debates. It's the same old stuff, and America deserves better. She doesn't make it entirely about her. She makes it about the people they are both running to represent. Not a bad message, if you ask me. James Carville is a longtime Democratic strategist. Reverend Al Sharpton is the president of the National Action Network and the host of Politics Nation. These are two of the wisest and most fun people to talk politics with, and they join me now. So thank you both so much. I've been so excited about this conversation. So, James, let me start with you, because the debate and Donald Trump's actions over the last 24 hours are just, I mean, a little strange. But it reminded me of when President George H.W. Bush was hesitant to debate Bill Clinton in 1992. And you recruited, I'm sure you remember this, Clinton supporters to show up at Bush rallies in a chicken suit. There's some video footage there, probably brings you back. I mean, feels like we have kind of another chicken on our hands here. But how do you think, you saw the vice president's response, how do you think she should be handling this?
Well, thank you, Jen. First of all, I want to thank Reverend Al publicly for participating in the documentary. The Hollywood guys told me you crushed it, Reverend. And I think that she should say, I'll debate him on Fox on the night of September 18th, because I happen to know he's going to be in Manhattan on the 18th, because that's when they're going to sentence him. Oh. And I'm sure Judge Merchan would give a delay in the execution of sentencing to allow him to show up at a debate. So if you want to have a debate, let's have it on Fox, and let's have it September the 18th when he's in an ankle bracelet.
That's quite a visual. I tend to agree that she should just do the Fox debate. Why not? Yeah. But Reverend Sharpton, what do you think?
I totally agree with Mr. Carville because I think he's right. I think it also will emphasize to the public, if she were to make that response, that this is a race between a prosecutor and a felon. Let's not take off the table. He has a sentencing date. And I think Carville's right. We can ask the judge not to remand him so he can go to the debate, or ask his parole officer, can he attend the debate? But why are we taking off the table? This is a convicted felon that is debating a woman who was the prosecutor in San Francisco and then elected state prosecutor of all the state of California before she went to the Senate and became vice president.
No question. And I don't think anyone should take that off the table. It's an interesting idea to do it the day of the sentencing. So there's a couple questions here. But I agree. I think she's a good debater and could be good no matter what the forum is. Let me ask you guys, I've been dying to ask you guys about the VP process. I know you've both spoken to it a little bit. And James, let me start with you, because you've said, and I agree with this, that the VP pick, it's not going to massively, it historically hasn't massively moved the electoral needle. I mean, people shouldn't have that expectation, I guess I should say. Sometimes it's 1 point, sometimes 2 points, sometimes nothing. Historically, it's basically been barely a bump. But there's been reasons that people have picked their running mates, right? I mean, Clinton picked Gore, two young guys. Obama picked Biden, older senator with foreign policy experience. It's about chemistry. It's also about complementing. So let me start with you, James. Who do you think politically would complement Harris the best of the people you've seen out there?
Well, it's really not enough to me to say. I would be totally satisfied with any of them.
Yeah.
What we had was generational, and it really made a difference. And I'm sorry, the J.D. Vance thing has hurt Trump, and Trump knows it. He's a hit dog, and he's barking because, we say out in rural America, it's the hit dog that barks. And Donald Trump is one hit dog, and he's barking. And this Vance thing is blown up in his face like he's getting scratched like a cat.
Literally a cat, but by unmarried cat ladies, perhaps. I don't even know.
There you go.
Yeah, but do you have a view? I mean, electorally, maybe it doesn't matter. Is there anything? She's obviously a strong candidate. Is there anything that would help complement her from what you see out there politically?
Maybe a little bit. None of these people would hurt her in the least. All right, it's just a question of what is the need that she wants to fulfill, and she's earned the right to make that choice herself. And we, as people like Reverend Al and I, who are good Democrats, we're going to fall in line and salute whoever it is. And there's nothing that we're going to say here today that's going to sway it one way or the other. So I'm just ready to salute and get it going.
No question. Well, let me ask you, Reverend Charbon, you know her well. You've run for president yourself. You've thought about these types of choices. What do you think? I mean, what kind of a person? You can name names if you want, but kind of what qualities or what do you think she would be looking for?
I think she will be looking for someone that agrees with her on the direction of the country, that is not trying to in any way not follow the policies and visions she's outlined. And I think someone that has the chemistry to work with her. A lot of this is about chemistry. In the 3 or 4 presidents that I've had access to, particularly with President Obama and Joe Biden, I always observed the chemistry they have with each other in the room. Mm-hmm. You could have someone that is the best candidate. You could have someone that is aligned with you in terms of policy. But if the chemistry doesn't work, they're not going to be the one you want to work with you in the White House.
No question. I feel like the Trump and Vance chemistry might be awkward at this point in time, if I were to guess.